Well, here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next. It's the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I'm talking with vocalist, guitarist, writer-arranger, and producer of dark metal band O ZORN, Bill Kielty. Back in March, the band released their latest album, Vermillion Haze, on Seeing Red Records. And if you would like to have a vinyl copy, you can go directly to the record label. Or if you prefer to listen on streaming services, it is available there too. And speaking of being available on streaming services, you can listen to this interview on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Substack, as well as here on YouTube. And how do I know you're watching this on YouTube? Because this is a new introduction, because I like to make my life more complicated, as several ex-girlfriends can probably attest to. Please like and subscribe, etc., etc. So as well as discussing Vermillion Haze, Bill Kielty and I talk about some of his other projects, as well as looking back a bit on previous albums of the band, other songs, some of the artwork that the band has used, which is very interesting and striking, not just the latest release, but particularly their first album, which we talk about a little bit. We talk about some of the trials and tribulations that Bill went through and the band as well over the past years, not least being the pandemic, but it's also a story that includes suicide, drug addiction, and rotating band members. So yeah, a lot has been going on. Yeah, I like Vermillion Haze a lot. I think Bill Kielty has a distinctive songwriting style, and the execution of the band is very powerful. It's dark, it's atmospheric. Decibel magazine called the band post-metal. I'm never really sure exactly what post-metal means, but it's got sludge elements, it's got doom elements, but there is a real ear for melody in the music. It's very, very mournful as well. I'm going to play a little clip of Slow Mood from the album, and then I'm going to play that in full at the end of the interview. If you'd like to keep up to date with the band, follow them at O ZORN Rocks on Instagram. And if you'd like to follow me in a non-stalkerish way, you can follow me on all social media at Tom Osman Sounds. And if you want to check out my own musical project, you can go to tomosmansounds.com. And now there's nothing left to say, but take it away, Bill Kielty of O ZORN. I was going to say hi, Bill, and now I don't know, should I say hi, William?
You can say William, that's fine.
Thanks for joining me. Good to see you.
No problem, man. How are you?
Yeah, Tom, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you, Tom.
Cool. It just occurred to me you probably have about 8 interviews today, and I'm probably right in the middle of them.
Yeah, all good, man. No worries.
Well, I guess one of the first things I should say is that I've really been enjoying Vermillion Haze a lot.
Oh, thank you.
It's super cool sounding album, and I don't know what to call it, but it makes me, when I listen to it, it makes me do that, that face where you're like I don't know what you call it. It's like the kind of
I do that when I'm playing it.
kind of like the sludge metal face.
Yeah, we get that tag.
Well, indeed, I don't want to tag you with being any specific genre, because I think
right.
The band kind of moves between a variety of different styles, so I wouldn't want to peg you as being any one thing in particular.
Yeah, great.
But on the topic of Vermillion Haze, so you went to Tampa, Florida to record it, is that right?
That's right.
And what was the story behind that choice of location or that choice of studio?
There's a producer down there. His name's Ryan Bush. He's worked. I've known him for years. He's worked with a lot of. I mean, everyone from Andrew WK to Peaches to, Whores and Faith No More, a bunch of bands. He's been wanting to work with us for a while. He actually wanted to work with us on our last record, Your Killer, but just logistics and whatnot, we couldn't make that happen. But this time around, we figured out a way to just get down there and record with him. And then we're obviously on the West Coast. They're on the East Coast there, and yeah, that was really it. He asked, we showed up and gave us a good deal, and that that was it. It was just the drummer and I, though, because after Your Killer had been released in March of 2020, the pandemic happened, and truth be told, the band kind of fell apart in the months after, because we had all kinds of plans in support of the record, and literally the week that it came out was the week the country got shut down. So any kind of plans that we had as far as touring or in support of the record were just shut down.
Yeah.
One of the members got caught up in drugs again, and another member just disappeared. So I was kind of left with really nobody, and I ended up recruiting another drummer. We ended up spending about a solid year writing the new record, because I just figured, hell, I wasn't sure when the pandemic was going to let up, or when we'd even be able to get back to business. And so just figured in the meantime, oh shit, we'll just start writing a new album. And thank God we did. So it was really just the drummer and I, and we decided to record with Ryan. Again, just the drummer and I flew down there and tracked everything. And it was a process of, probably 3 or 4 months of going back and forth too. We had gone out and tracked drums and most of the guitar work. And then I'd gone back to track vocals and finish up some guitars. And then that time that I went down there, producer came down with COVID. My wife, who had flown out, came down with COVID while we were out there. And so that kind of got shut down, delayed things for a while, but we eventually got back on track and finished it up.
And so despite all of the disruption that you've described, and I'm sure there was a lot, I mean, I know now that I've read the press release that a lot has been going on in the past years. It sounds like this didn't lead you to do things remotely. It wasn't like you were file sharing from different cities. You actually, like, you were making the music with the drummer together. Was everything done like all in one room?
Yeah, we had we ended up getting we ended up getting a lockout unit up in Vernon, California, which is about 30 minutes away from where I am in this industrial area. Yeah, and him and I just holed up in there for months on end and just hashing it out. And until we had, and started demoing things out. I was able to, I mic'd everything, mic'd all the drums, mic'd the guitar work, and just started tracking and piecing stuff together, and finally came up with a good album's worth of demos, and then sent it to Ryan. Ryan was happy with what we were doing, and then we just set up a day and set up the time to fly down to Tampa and then hash it out.
And how much, like, on the production, recording, engineering side of things, how much experience have you got? Because you, just in terms of like finding out information online, there's not a lot of info about other musical projects you've had outside of O ZORN, but I'm pretty sure that you must have done a ton of other things too. You've probably built up a lot of recording production experience over the years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So O ZORN's actually been around since 2009. That's kind of when I first started the band. We have our first record. If you look it up online, it shows that it was released in 2018, but that album was actually done in 2012. It just took a while to it's taken a while to kind of navigate the seas of releasing music these days. And back in like 2010, 2011, everything was still very unsure, with Spotify and streaming music and all the platforms that were out. And, where exactly to put it. We didn't have a record label. Labels were still shy of even signing bands back then. Very difficult because through most of the 2000s, it was very difficult to find a label to even release music because it just record labels have lost so much money once Napster came out, and they had to figure out how to make money again. You know what I mean? I think I still don't think they figured it out. But to answer your question, yeah, I was in a band before O ZORN. I was in a band called Who Rides the Tiger. We have one album out, and then before that, I was in a band called Wagner. And yeah, so I mean, I've been out for a while, and being in Los Angeles, I've had a lot of opportunities to track in a lot of, really nice studios, and a lot of studios at that. So yeah, I do have a lot of experience in the production world.
And so how hands-on were you in terms of the sound of the record?
So I literally flew down to Tampa without any of my gear. I used whatever gear Ryan had in his studio, which was limited, but he had a few good amps, and I had to bring my own guitars, of course. Our guitars are set up in a way where they would only work for what we're doing because because of the low tuning and the super heavy gauge strings. And back then I had the way my pickups were set up as well with my guitars. So I literally just brought guitar. What did I bring? I brought 3 guitars with me. Our drummer, we ended up borrowing a drum kit from a local thrash metal band down in Tampa, and literally just everything you hear on that the new record it's just whatever we could find and figure out inside the studio. So we picked a couple of amps, picked a couple of different pedals and whatnot, and then just started creating good guitar tones, and Ryan of course helped, but as far as like miking and everything, and as far as like the actual engineering of the record, that was all Ryan. And then as far as producing and whatnot, I pretty much handle all the producing of our own records. Ryan of course is also a producer on the album, but for the most part, I wrote everything and structured everything and arranged everything. And so, and that's kind of been the case anytime I go track. I figure, my ears is for production purposes, my ears to me is gonna be the best fit for anything that I do. Yeah. But Ryan, as far as like arrangements and structuring, and then just coming up with good tones and sound, he's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that struck me about the sound of the album, or just kind of like thinking about the sound of your different albums, like the progression, is that your vocal style seems to have evolved. And I'm sure that that's partly the case, but I'm also curious how much of it is to do with the production choices that you've had. Like, I feel on the latest album, I don't want to say, it's almost kind of like it feels like there's a little bit less grit, like it's kind of a smoother tone. But then, for example, you've got like I See Through You, which is clearly like there is grit in that, but I feel like the way you've produced it somehow sounds a bit smoother. So how much of the sound of your vocals would you put down to changes over the years as opposed to the production choices?
Yeah, so I think so. Before O ZORN, I was like I said, I was in a band called Wagner, and I was also in a band called Who Rides the Tiger. And both of those bands, especially Wagner was a little bit more songwriter-esque. So in the early 2000s, we had gotten involved with a big management group, same management group that handles Coachella and Golden Boy, is all one of the biggest production companies here in Los Angeles. And I ended up getting teamed up with a couple of producers out there that kind of helped groom me towards becoming more of kind of and I hate to use the term, but more of kind of a commercial songwriting, a songwriter in regards to structure and in regards to arrangement, kind of learning how to write in that, verse, chorus, breakdown chorus type of manner. And so whenever I write a song, even with O ZORN, I typically kind of gravitate towards kind of a more of a accessible commercial writing arrangement. When we first started O ZORN, if you listen to the first album, the self-titled record, it is very gritty, it's very doomy, it's very heavy and gnarly. And going into the second record, I wanted it to be a little bit more accessible. I don't want to just attract sludge and doom people, listeners all day long. And of course, I appreciate them, but I just wanted our sound to be a little more accessible for the everyday listener, someone that can listen to like I See Through You and go, oh yeah, that's it's heavy, but yet it's still catchy. It has a big chorus. It's got all those elements that a normal listening audience would take to a little bit easier. And then also me wanting to get away from the screamy growly vocal approach, because it's just not really me anymore. Back, like I said, when I first started O ZORN, that's what we were into, just super heavy and super sludgy, and but what also kind of pushed me away from that sound is how saturated the market is with doom metal bands and of that type. And yeah, I wanted to broaden our horizons a little bit with our listening audience. I mean, that's about it. But I've always kind of had the smoother voice in me, because from bands past. And so and then also writing and melody and coming up with cool vocal melodies and harmonies and whatnot. I always had that before O ZORN. And now I just kind of incorporated it into our sound.
I think it's really cool, like I like a lot of extreme metal. I like a lot of bands that have got very aggressive or growled or screamed or whatever vocals. I'm totally into lots of that, but I do think that your style in O ZORN has a lot of elements to it. It's got a lot of character, like I think there's a couple of songs on the first album that remind me a little bit of Kurt Cobain, that kind of raw style. And I think on the latest album, I found myself thinking of Kirk Windstein quite a lot, like in the more sort of like the mournful Crowbar kind of material, sort of like crooning in a pained kind of way. And and I don't know if anyone's made this comparison, I sometimes hear a bit of Billy Corgan in your voice, but like not as high and nasally, but there's something in that kind of snarl about it. Are there any particular singers that, I mean, for the latest album or in general, that you've sort of found particularly useful for modeling yourself on, or maybe just sort of like taking some aspect, or it's mostly just kind of been what organically came out?
It's usually always what organically comes out. And I've gotten the Billy Corgan comparison from past bands as well. So I think there is that sound in there. I've gotten a few, yeah, and I've gotten the Kurt from Crowbar. As a matter of fact, one of our songs, Your Killer, gets compared to a Crowbar song. I can't really remember the name of it though. What's funny is I remember people making comparisons. What is the name of the Crowbar song? We've gotten compared to it a bunch. I can't remember the name of it, but and I had never heard Crowbar once before being compared to him. And I listened to him. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. No, there was a lot of similarities. Like, oh wow, that's crazy. But no, it's all organically. It just comes out. I'm not trying to sound like anybody else. It's just whatever comes out of my body.
And so another thing that struck me very early on listening to Vermillion Haze, and this is before I read the press release, and then I read the press release and I kind of went, okay, I've got some context, is it does sound very mournful. And, like your previous albums are not like a laugh a minute, like it's dark music, but it did seem to me like there was an extra layer of mournfulness in this album. And as I say, and I've read the press release, I have a sense of that, but maybe, and you're probably being asked this a million times, but maybe you could go in a bit to like what it was in particular when you listen to the record now. Like, what do you sort of hear in terms of the stuff that you and the band have gone through over the course of making it?
Gosh, man, I just think when we were writing it, God, it was pretty bleak, you know what I mean, out here anyways. Especially with the pandemic. I hear a lot of the, like, just when I hear it, and I've been asked this question before, yeah, I just hear a lot of like the current of that time period in the album, having to kind of restart, being sad, you know what I mean? Because the lyrics came later, but as far as like the music is concerned, because we write all the music basically first. I do all the lyrics later, but I do feel like there was a lot of confusion. I also wanted to go into more of a, gosh, I don't know if this is the right way to explain it, but I did want to get a little more emotional and a little more lofty with the record, a little more atmospheric. And I really pushed myself vocally to really bring out, the intensity of the music. I don't know if that makes any sense, but to answer your question, I just think it was the time period when we were writing it. Just everything was shut down. Everybody was confused. I had some things happen to me in my personal life too that affected my lyrical content. Never saw it coming, for example. You know what I mean? I had a friend commit suicide during the pandemic. He had lost both his brother and his father like within 2 days of each other. The pain of that, and
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about the pandemic. It's so weird kind of looking back over the last few years now. It sort of feels like everything got sucked into a black hole and all sort of time has been distorted, and it's all become a bit of a blur in a way.
everything
So
is weird right now. It's funny you say that, because everything is just kind of, it's turned everything a little bland.
mm,
I don't know if that makes sense, but it's hard to find for me anyways here in SoCal. It's here in Long Beach especially too. It's like there's there just isn't the excitement in the air that there used to be. I lived kind of near a little downtown area here in Long Beach, or in the neighborhood where I live, where there's bars and restaurants and whatnot. But everything is there's just there's no excitement anymore we go out to dinner and we go to bars and stuff like that, but just the overall just vibe in general is just kind of blah.
yeah, I do kind of get the feeling that people all over the world are sort of in a state of anxiety and uncertainty now. So maybe that's part of kind of what's contributing to what you're talking about the feeling of things being bland. People have kind of lost some kind of spark.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that yeah, it's very strange. It's a strange feeling. But then I've also gotten accustomed to just kind of the isolation, so I've learned to enjoy being at home more. So there are silver linings of the whole thing. Whereas before I just was always antsy, had to get out, and do something. Um, you know, uh, Pre-pandemic, you know what I mean? I was hanging out in bars a lot more, which probably wasn't, the best thing to do. So there is one silver lining of the whole thing. I think it's gotten me anyways to kind of just get comfortable with just being home a lot more, and not feeling, the whole FOMO thing, fear of missing out.
Yep.
That's not as prevalent anymore, because during the pandemic, you were missing out on everything. So,
Yeah, there was a certain kind of adjustment there. On a slightly lighter note, so your other guitarist's name is Justin, right?
right,
And your bass player's name is also Justin.
that's correct.
So presumably you have nicknames for the different Justins. How do you differentiate Justin from Justin?
Honestly, I don't know. We don't. I actually hadn't really thought about it. I mean, usually by the last name, Suter.
Okay.
Justin Suter, we usually call Suter. And then Justin Morales, we actually call him Justin. So
Okay.
Suter's just kind of the last name. Interesting note on that, actually. So the drum. So those guys all came from a band called Painted Wives. Painted Wives was a band signed to Century Media Records, and they're from Huntington Beach, which is the next town over. And when we first started writing the new album, I grabbed their drummer, Derek, joined me to help write the new record. Once the record was done, I needed another guitar player and a bass player, and so I ended up recruiting the other two members of that band, being Justin Suter and Justin Morales, to join the band. So it's basically it's it's three quarters of a band called Painted Wives who are now with us now. So
And did they, now you said that you were writing the songs with the drummer. So I'm just going to call them both Justin. Did Justin and Justin have some kind of songwriting contribution, or the songs already fully formed once you brought them in?
after the fact, so once the album was what I felt was done, I ended up bringing those guys in to contribute some lead work. I ended up having Justin Morales come in and redo some bass work as well, which I'm glad I did because I was able to include them, in the album, which was great for just keeping them involved and keeping their spirits up in the band, and as opposed to just giving them a record and saying, hey, learn these guitar lines, and and then we'll book some shows. So I actually brought them into the recording process, like, again, to get them involved and have some sort of ownership on the record.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to get to is you've got very striking artwork if you go through O ZORN's records. At the moment, like the latest album on Vermillion Haze, you've got this really cool sort of, it's like a face, but you can see there's actually figures inside this face. And obviously the first album, you've got this, I love it. It's hilarious with the mother with like the happy kid, but the happy kid's got corpse paint on.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
How much I mean, I guess you are like the driving force of the artwork, but what's kind of been the inspiration behind the different phases of the O ZORN visual image?
Well, I mean, I didn't create the artwork. The first album was created by my friend Steve Jones, who owns a company called All Hail the Black Market. He's up in Seattle, and he actually had a small record label that ended up doing the vinyl pressing of an album I did with a band called Who Rides the Tiger. He had actually come up with that, and that was actually a page out of a magazine. It was just a woman holding her child, and I think it was might have been like a baby food advertisement in a magazine, and he just ended up ripping it out of the magazine and painting over it. And then that's how we came up with that. The second album has a big shark on the front, and I actually took that photo. So I do great white cage diving down in Mexico.
Oh wow!
Well, I did for many years, and so that is actually a photo of me in the cage looking up towards the top of the water as a shark is just mouth agape coming in onto a piece of tuna. And so that actually was just a kind of just a lucky shot. I was literally just holding down my shot and happened to capture that image. So that became our second album cover. And then this third album was done by a really good friend of mine, Chris Friedman, who's done a lot of artwork for like the Mars Volta, the Afghan Wigs, and a bunch of other kind of cool bands. But he created the artwork for this album.
Yeah, and also as well, on top of all that, there's another cool piece of artwork you've got for the Slow Mood single. It's like it reminds you a bit of Metropolis, that 1920s Fritz Lang movie.
Yeah, also done by Chris Friedman. So Chris had actually come up with the album artwork and then did a series of panels that were related to, that were themed after the album artwork, which was great because I was able to, so every song on the album has its own art panel, themed after the actual album artwork.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And before I let you get away to probably your next instantaneous interview, in terms of people getting the record, or I say record, the album in whatever format, and following the band, where should they go? What should they buy? How should they support O ZORN?
Well, follow us on Instagram, at O ZORN Rocks. We're pretty much at O ZORN Rocks across all platforms. And of course, we're on Spotify. And I would say, yeah, start with that first record, self-titled, and then work to your killer. And this album, like, will be streaming up, will be available March 15th. You can pre-order the vinyl at Seeing Red Records. They're the ones that are releasing the actual vinyl. And unfortunately, they are running behind on production, so we will not
It's a
have
common story at the moment, I think, with vinyl.
part of the course. Yeah. Yeah, we were hoping to have vinyl. We're having a little record release party out here in Costa Mesa, California on the 23rd. So but yeah, we're available, on all streaming platforms. You can find the music.
And you've got some tour dates lined up for supporting the album?
Not at the moment. We have our show coming up, and then we're playing the Maryland Doom Fest in Baltimore in June, and so we'll be booking shows on the way out and then on the way back. And then, gosh, you know what I mean? We're gonna see how this new record does, and hopefully it does well, and we can get out to Europe actually and do some festivals at some point.
Well, I definitely hope so. Well, yeah, as I say, Bill, I really like the album a lot, Vermillion Haze. I think it's super cool. Definitely deserves to do well. So I wish you all the success on the release. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you at some time playing in Europe.
That'd be great, Tom. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Have a good one.
All the best. Bye-bye.